told a big, fat, juicy lie when I was 17 years old to the federal government. I sent in an application to the Forest Service in Helena, Montana. And it read something like this. Dear Mr. Forest Ranger, I want a job. I am 19 years old, first lie. I have 2 years experience, second lie. And he got the application and approved it. So here I am sitting in Missouri. I get this application approved. I hitchhike out to Montana, Helena, Montana. I stand before Carl Marsh, the ranger, and he looked at me with a jaundiced eye like, you gotta be kidding me. This baby-faced kid, 1 year experience, 19 years old? No way. But he didn't say a thing. I was blessed all summer long because I did the job for him. He loved it, and it worked out. What was the job? The first job was to go out and try to control the spruce budworm, which was eating up the Douglas fir trees. How'd I know all this stuff? My brother had coached me. He worked in the Forest Service in Boners Ferry, Idaho the year before. That's how I learned about it. I went down to the library and I knew all the difference between a lodgepole pine, ponderosa pine, Douglas fir, and so on. So Carl Marsh kept me on. I kept doing a good job, had a good time. The job was to go out there and throw a blanket out, 4 different locations a day, probably about 20 miles apart. I could use a vehicle to a certain extent, but I had to walk 3 to 5 miles to get to where I wanted to go, into the forest. We were along the Continental Divide, whereas if you poured a bucket of water, half would go to the Pacific, half would go to the Atlantic. It was all vegetated, all over the place. Ponderosa pines, Douglas fir trees. So I laid out my blanket. I would go to the closest Douglas fir tree. I'd take branches. I'd go over the blanket. And I would get the bug off of there, the worm, and I'd put them in 6 files. And when they hit most of them in the 5th file, that's when we called in the spray. That's the way we controlled forest fires. That's the way we controlled the spruce bedworm. It was eating up the forest at the time. On the weekends, we were free, and we looked forward to fighting a fire because we got time and a half on Saturday, double time on Sunday. And for a GS4 making $1.25 an hour, when you could double that on the weekend, I mean, that tallied up. I could pay for college expense, which was only $35 a semester. Actually a quarter, because we were on the quarter system then. We converted to semester later, and $35 for the fraternity fee to stay in the fraternity, so that took care of my housing. So I made enough during the summer in order to go to college. A couple things that happened out there in the forest service, just wonderful things. I mean, it was just the best experience I ever had up to that time. So one time there was a bobcat. I was there with my blanket and filling up the vial. There's a bobcat right over my shoulder. You know how you get this feeling something's looking at you? There it was right there. I saw about 5 or 10 different kinds of animals. A grizzly bear walked right across in front of me one time on the trail when I was out. Mind you, I'm out there by myself, out in the middle of nowhere, and there's a grizzly bear. Thank goodness I was upwind. So a lot of experiences like that. What do we do on the weekend? We fought fires. When we weren't fighting fires, we would go down to Gardner, to the dump. The grizzly bears would appear there overnight because they were eating the food at the dump. And one night we were there, I remember this very clearly. We were in Ray Arnsmeyer's 1948 Ford. We were all crammed in there, about 10 of us. And I had to go to the bathroom. So being a vain guy, I got out, walked over, across the fence, way over here. And I'm over there going to the bathroom, and all of a sudden I hear this, grizzly, grizzly, grizzly. I made a beeline back. I forgot that there was a barbed wire fence there. But I made it to the car. They kept the doors closed, those ornery guys and girls, but they left the window open. Right through the window, I'm safe. Then they said, just kidding.
Oh my God.
Right. Well, there wasn't much to do, and that's the kind of thing that we did. So I have to ask you if you think I lied telling these stories. Actually, I didn't. They are all true. I could have told you more. But they are true stories. And at my age now, there's no benefit, there's no incentive to tell a lie. So, and besides that, I couldn't remember it anyhow, so therefore, I have to tell the truth. Thank you very much.